You know, the public battle is normally between the addicts themselves, their misguided sympathizers and supporters on the one hand, and the forces of law and order, to put it roughly, on the other hand. But unless it strikes a family, you often don't think too much about it. But always remember this: in 500 homes, some rich, some poor, some hovels, throughout this province at any given time, somebody is fixing up. And fixing up isn't the nicest thing in the world to happen to anyone. We know the litany of death and disaster that has happened in this province because of it. Have you ever seen anybody taking a fix? Have you ever seen anybody with a spoon and their whatnots and their illicit heroin of doubtful quality being used? I want to show you a little bit of what happens right now in that kind of thing. And this is quite normal. You know how much that costs? Anything up to $60 for low-grade heroin, depending on the state of the market at any particular given time. And then if you think of the amount of the police expenditures and the police work involved, it really would turn your stomach for this damnable, disasterly trade. And I make no apologies for being emotional about it. But my particular fear at this particular time, being one of the few outspoken proponents in the media of the compulsory plan, simply is that it may well have been watered down so much that it might not produce the desired effect. It might not produce the patient flow. It might cause some of them to run away. And I think I can demonstrate to you now, so that you can understand, the incredible campaign there was to water down the original Compulsory Treatment Act. Look at it in headlines. The bill is launched by the government. Full details given out by the government. Detention time, without appeal at that in the first draft of the bill. The police could pick you up for 72 hours, no bother at all. And, of course, then the storm began. The policemen, of course, backed to plan. They see it at the grassroots level. And then the program became a farce. A minority of lawyers fought it tooth and nail. It was a dangerous plan. And they went beyond that, too, did some members of the legal profession, apart from the protests from the neighbors around the Brannen Lake Centre. The whole thing was to be a disaster. And, in fact, of course, we don't quite know how it's going to happen, I'll tell you that much. But this morning, we're going to make a very good effort to find out precisely how the Heroin Maintenance Act will apply. And I shall be interviewing Bob McClelland, the Minister of Health, Bert Hoskin and Les Bewley of the treatment plan, and others. And Brian Coxford's been over to Bryan Lake to have a good look at the revised facility. And we'll be back with this hard look at the heroin plan immediately after this break. You know it, and I know it. And most of all, Bob McClelland, the Minister of Health in the government of Victoria, knows that the eyes of North America will be on the implementation of the Social Credit Government's bold Heroin Treatment Act. Mr. McClelland, a simple, straightforward question. Will you be ready to go as advertised, full scale, on the 1st of January 1979 with the Heroin Treatment Act?
Well, basically, Jack, the answer to that question is yes. However, the sheer enormity of putting this program together may cause us to hold off on a couple of components of it. But basically, those people who come into the program in most of the ways of entry will be handled, the facilities will be available, and the program will be in place on the 1st of January 1979.
One of the components you might well be doubtful about is the issuing of notices to addicts on the street, Mr. McClelland. Will you be delaying that, perhaps, say, till April or May?
Well, there's a possibility of that, Jack, because that's the easiest part of the program to delay. We certainly wouldn't want to delay the opportunity for the courts, for instance, to refer people to our program. So the delay would likely come in that area over which we can have some control, and that would be in the issuance of permits. It would be a very short delay, And as soon as all of our staff were in place, then the rest of the program will go into place.
So therefore you are a bit behind schedule. I'll concede that because of the watering down of the Act, that you had to change many of your procedures. Is that not correct?
Well, I wouldn't say that the Act is watered down, Jack, because what we've done is we've reacted to the pressures and the needs of the community, and the Act, in my opinion, is a much better one than that which was first put forward. But certainly some of our planning had to be changed. But basically, you know, we were hiring somewhere in the neighborhood of between 300 and 400 people. And that's a big job, and it's going to take us a little longer than we had hoped.
In other words, you might only have 100 or so hired by the 1st of January 1979.
Oh, I hope we'll have a lot more than that. We'll be very close to full complement when the program goes into place, but there will be some delay, and it will be a very short one, Jack.
Mr. McClelland, you've always been forthright and frank with me, and you know I've been a supporter of the program. But when you tell me that the watered-down Act is going to be as effective in the first instance as your originally carefully thought out act, you must be being politic.
Not at all, Jack. And, you know, if, for instance, I had thought that we were watering down our act and were making that act inoperable, I wouldn't have had anything to do with it, nor would many of the people who are working with me. We have an act which will work. And you're right about the eyes of North America being upon us. I don't consider this to be a watered-down act. All of the components are still there. The treatment proposals are all still fully in place. There was no change in any of those, and I just don't accept that it's a watered-down act.
Well, just to be quite specific, under the old Act, a person dependent on narcotics could be picked up, taken, held for 72 hours, was not released while his appeal was pending. The onus of proof that he was not an addict, not a person in need of treatment, was on him. Well, and now the whole thing has been reversed, and you might have to wait 3 months to get an application in front of a Supreme Court judge to have a man committed.
Well, Jack, I guess that, you know, that'll have to wait to be seen. But first of all, what you're talking about is not necessarily what any act that was before the BC legislature said. The first proposals that were put forward in the form of a white paper did say the things that you're saying, but the Act never said that. The Act that was before the House never went that far.
Well, it did in the primary instances, but let's not argue about that. Are you now happy with the fact that the only way that addicts can be kind of brought into the stream, including the detention at Brannen Lake, is either by a self-commitment or by a probation order, providing the evaluation panel decides the person on probation is in need of the treatment, or by a Supreme Court order applied for by your people?
Yes, I am, Jack, and I think that that will give us all of the access to addicts in the province that we would ever need in order to develop our treatment programs. And I'm convinced that you know, that we haven't diluted the prime nature of the Act in making some changes as we did in the legislature.
Certainly much more sophisticated than it was, eh?
Well, and you know, Jack, that's what the legislature's for, to determine the final nature of legislation which goes forward for all British Columbians. And I think that even the fact that two of the opposition parties, the Liberal and Conservative members in the House, considering the fact that they have now supported our Act, gives me a lot of hope that the Act will have the desired results, and that's to help us eliminate the problems that are created in our society with heroin addiction.
Now for the good news, Mr. McClelland. Are you getting the same tum-tum that I'm getting, for the very presence of the Act in being has caused, as has been said to at least one judge in court in Vancouver, I'm going to get out of town, addicts saying this? Have you found that, in fact, some of your patient flow is flowing out to Alberta?
No, I have no evidence of that, Jack, and certainly that was never the intention of our Act. I'm hoping still that the Act was meant to be a treatment Act, and I know that it will still be. I don't have any evidence that people are leaving. No judges have talked to me on that basis, but maybe some of them would go home because we have a lot of addicts who don't belong in British Columbia in the first place.
You see, what I've been really getting at, Mr. McClelland, as I said, I hope the thing works with all my heart and soul. But I'm afraid that with your period of grace on right now and the very slow response under the period of grace, what is the response under the period of grace?
Jack, I'm not I'm not able to tell you that because I haven't checked with the commission since the period of grace came into being on the 1st of the month. I can't tell you that.
I can get that, but I really don't want a situation to arise, Mr. Minister, whereby you have more staff hired for Brannen Lake, etc., than you have patient flow because of the difficulties of getting people voluntarily or through the courts into the system.
No, I doubt very much if that will happen, Jack. And, the indication is that the courts will use our facilities. Our program is not going to collapse. Even if someone disputes through the courts the entry into our system, I think we're going to have plenty of patients, and maybe people won't take advantage of the period of grace. They may need that extra nudge. If they didn't need that extra nudge to begin with, we probably wouldn't have had to go through this whole exercise of developing the Heroin Treatment Act.
How many people have you actually hired up to now, or shall I get that from the Commission?
I'd suggest you get that from the Commission. We've recently been given approval by Treasury Board to go full bore and to hire all of the people that are necessary for our program. And what the numbers that have actually been hired to this date, I couldn't say, Jack.
Have you got the full $15 million, or have you just got $5 million to keep you going till the end of the year?
No. Well, we don't have any money, but we've got approvals for the entire program, Jack. And we haven't done it in piecemeal form, and we didn't want to do it in piecemeal form. However, we'll only implement that portion of the program that we find necessary from time to time. But we have full approval from Treasury Board to move with the program full scale ahead.
Brannen Lake will be ready to go with a fair amount of capacity for detention cases on the 1st of January. Is that correct?
As far as I know, Brannen Lake is going to be ready. In fact, I believe that renovations are underway at Brannen Lake right now.
So just to sum up, you're set to go on the 1st of January. Certain aspects, such as the issuing of notices by the police to addicts, may well be held back until when? March or April?
Well, I would hope probably the 1st of March would be a good starting time, or the 1st of April, Jack. But again, it's a purely physical requirement that we have a delay because we simply cannot, no matter what we did right at the present time, have hired enough people to implement our whole program. So as soon as those people are hired, then we move into the other aspects of the program.
One last question. How long will the scheme go before you decide whether, as you once told me, that if it's a flop, you'll junk it?
Well, we've said right from the beginning, and I've put this in the form of a presentation to the federal government as well, that we would like to have this considered to be a 5-year demonstration project. I don't think anyone could ask that we have it any less than 5 years in order to evaluate its effectiveness. If at the end of 5 years, if I'm still around, but whether or not I'm here, I would like to see the government seriously consider its options if the evaluation shows that the program has not worked.
You disagree with me totally that it's been watered down to a point of administrative difficulties for the Commission?
No, I would have to completely disagree with that, Jack. I think the program, there's no doubt that we'll have that maybe we'll have to work harder to administer it, but that's fair enough. We're in this business, and we'll accept that.
Mr. McClelland, I shouldn't say this, but best of luck with your program.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Bob.
Michael, in case he does.
Yeah.
On yet. Brian, say a couple of words, please.
Test 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
That's beautiful. And you're not what we're filming. That's right. Beautiful.
Well, Jack, the Heroin Treatment Center for the Hardcore Addicts is located at Brannen Lake, just near Nanaimo. And the renovations to an existing government building are underway right now. Now, when we visited the site last week, two obvious questions came up. The resort-like setting of the center. Perhaps it's too lavish, perhaps it could be used for something else. And security, the problem of keeping the addicts in and the drugs out. In the days when this facility was called the Brannen Lake Island Youth Camp, juvenile offenders walked these hallways. Starting in January, this same facility will be converted to a heroin treatment center, and drug addicts will walk in their place. To replace this building would cost about $5 million and take 2 years. There's room for 150 addicts and a staff complement equally as large. The total operational cost per year, excluding rent, will be in the neighborhood of about $3 million. Once here, the patients, male and female, will be cared for by a medical staff of 55, 7 of them professional. 22 security personnel will ensure that they stay here for 6 months at a cost of $70 per day in the first year.
The first step is detoxification, followed by physical restoration. Now, I don't want to mislead anybody. Physical restoration goes on the whole time he's here. But basically, the first step is detoxification, and the second step is preliminary and basic physical restoration. So he may go from the detoxification unit into the sick bay or physical restoration unit. Then he goes into intensive treatment.
Once the addicts have completed the initial withdrawal stages, they'll be moved into the general population of the center in several dormitories.
We have 12 of those in the main building. They vary from 10 beds to 9 beds, depending on the unit. And each unit of 9 or 10 beds within its own unit has a lounge cum group counseling area. And so that we're keeping the groups very small. They'll be under care workers and counselors, and they will do some of their counseling right in their own little unit.
The hardcore addicts that are considered more difficult might find themselves in one of 2 small isolated units.
We're tearing some of the walls out to make them into bedrooms. And these 2 cottages will be used for the more difficult cases who require very intensive surveillance and support. But they're not in any terms detention. I think you'll find out they're very attractive units once we get away from the original use. It's geared so that they may spend some time in the pool, and I know you've seen the pool. They may go into our gym for again part of recreation physical restoration, and they may go into some of our outside activities. Now, we also have, as you know, a very good workshop, a very good arts and craft shop.
The kitchen facility can handle in excess of 200 people at one time. In the initial months of the operation, however, it will feed mostly staff. Since it's conceded by the officials, patient flow will be at a minimum.
We will have our staff organized so that we can call them in as our treatment builds up. We'll probably start with 132 staff and perhaps build up to 150, 157.
Opponents of the plan say the facility, although modest by design, is situated in a resort setting. The 146 acres on prime recreational land on the shores of Brannen Lake are too valuable to be used for a heroin treatment center. They say it appears more like a hotel than a hospital.
Brian, what about security? I mean, the shots we saw there, very nice place, lovely trees, lovely lawns. Is there a big waterfront there?
There's a waterfront, and I suppose the question would come about, it's conceivable somebody could drive up in a boat and pass drugs through the chain link fence, which will go up around the facility.
Did you see any sign of the chain link fence yet?
Hasn't gone up yet, but it'll be up by the time they're operational, of course.
So one of the things I should talk to Bert Hoskin about specifically is how are they going to keep the drugs out of Brannen Lake?
Sure, and I think a point should come about if you take, say, the facility of the BC Pen, concrete walls, tight security. We know that drugs get in there on almost a daily basis. And yet you got a facility here where you've got a chain link fence, minimum security, and you've got your addicts in there and you know what they want.
Mind you, hypothetically speaking, if you've got a willing addict in a pleasant surroundings like that and the swimming pool, what, no golf course?
No golf course.
You couldn't see one yet anyway. But hypothetically speaking, if a guy's properly motivated, that'd be a great place for him.
Oh, yeah.
Much
Beautiful
panic. Just a word on the panic. Have the neighbours subsided a little bit on their earlier protesting?
Well, I think they've more or less given up. They've sort of hit their heads against the wall, and but almost everyone in the neighborhood there was against it. Not so much that they're against addicts. They're against the fact that the land could have been used for something
We'll have
else.
another quiet look at it in 2 or 3 months and see how busy or not they are. Thanks very much, Brian. Next, we're going to raise the questions with Hoskins and the legal... Hoskin, Bert Hoskin, no S. And the legal consultant to the Alcohol and Drug Commission, one Judge Les Bewley. Margaret.
That's not very much to do with it, but I don't know whether I gave you that before or not.
9 minutes.
That's it.
I'm going to talk to you a little bit about these
I'll give you
bastards.
5. Okay.
You must admit McClelland's very adept at turning away a question, isn't he?
Yeah.
Would you like to say something, sir?
You're not on the
Yes.
list to do it.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, about this graffiti I was telling you about, there's a sign on the can there that says Jesus. And somebody says it must be Jesus.
Let's say something, sir.
I don't quite agree with you, Les.
You know?
Okay, that's
No, no,
good,
it's just a
gentlemen.
test for voice.
Bert Hoskins, you're the chairman of this whole caper, the Alcohol and Drug Commission.
Yes, I am.
How long have you been at it now, Bert?
Well, with the commission since the 1st of February 1976, but I've been in the game since 1964.
As
You
if I
know-
didn't know. The minister said you could tell me a couple of things. One, what's your total complement that you're planning to hire for the whole treatment program, including Brannen Lake?
Over 500,
More than 500
yes,
Quick.
at peak.
at peak. Okay, how many have you got hired now?
Well, we have, outside of a planning staff and the transfer of 41 people from the voluntary narcotic program, we're just in the throes of our first intake now. We hire through the Public Service Commission, as you know, and they are now, with our selection committees, processing over 1,000 applicants for the first advertisements that went in the papers.
Now, you saw my concern with the minister about the patient flow. You know, here you are, you're going to have 500 at peak, maybe 300 to 500 at the peak. And goodness gracious, I'm afraid you won't have 300 addicts to treat by the time you've got 300 staff hired.
No, but you must appreciate that we will bring the people in according to need, and we'll have a basic staff.
Oh, your need or their need?
The need of the program. I mean, we're not going to bring 500 and some odd people in right away if the build-up of intake doesn't warrant it.
All right, to be quite specific, Bert, you now operate, the period of grace is now operating, and I saw that period of grace was attacked by some do-gooder the other day as some fierce, horrible blackmail threat against the poor junkie, right?
That's complete nonsense. What we have done is to act ethically and properly in saying to any heroin user, and many of them have come to us and said, we really don't want to be part of this program. What can we do? And so we have said, for a 3-month period of grace, we offer you, in anonymity, without any record, the opportunity to come in and go through a medically and socially supported withdrawal. If you can stay clean after that period, we don't want to see you, and to us that's as much success as the program.
They won't, a junkie won't trust you that you won't keep records during the period of grace, you know that, Bert?
Well, we've worked with them, you know, since I started, since at least January 1965.
Question, in the period of grace which started on October the 1st, how many, in fact, have come forward and said, we want the 3-month kind of anonymous voluntary treatment?
We do it on a weekly basis. The first week there weren't any, but there were 2 queries. And we're not working on the basis of expecting X number of people to take advantage of the period of grace. All we're saying is, here's an opportunity, if you don't want to be caught up in the program, to have a withdrawal in anonymity, and if you can stay clean from thereafter,
I got
over
that
to
message, but what you're telling me is that since the period of grace started, not one single addict has come forward for actual treatment.
That's right.
What about the patient flow?
Well-
maybe we should look at that a little bit of detail with Judge Bewley. Judge, could you, and you've got more experience with drug addicts, I suppose, than any other judge in British Columbia, as much as any other judge, right?
Right.
Would you line out for me, as the legal consultant, the precise procedures by which you can bring a guy I'm going to use the word custody, detention, for the compulsory aspect of the treatment.
All right, Jack, but may I say at the outset, I'm a little disturbed to hear this term watered down. I think that's a bad analogy. Perhaps what's happened to the original concept was they added some lead to that gasoline. So we're adding lead rather than adding water. Now, as far as the compulsory aspect is concerned,
You raised the subject, I didn't, so just let's have at you on that. Are you suggesting to me that the plan has not been modified and made much more difficult for the Alcohol and Drug Commission to bring people in?
no.
That has not happened? Of course it has.
Well, of course it has, sure.
But necessarily, you feel.
Yeah, but it's still gasoline with some lead in it.
Okay.
All right?
Won't chase you on that. Now, if I'm a junkie, which is not unlikely if I keep up this job, how are you going to get me in?
Well,
The legal procedures.
two ways. The first way is that a peace officer will give you a notice to appear before an evaluation panel. That evaluation panel consists of at least 3 persons, 2 of whom must be medical practitioners. If that panel unanimously, and it must be unanimous, finds that you're a heroin dependent and in need of treatment for that, then you can be asked if you wish to go into the 3-year plan voluntarily. If you decline to do so, then the commission will go to a Supreme Court judge and ask for an order committing you into treatment. And of course, they must produce the evidence to satisfy the judge that you should be so committed. Now, that's one way you get in through the order of a Supreme Court judge.
But before you leave that, with respect, it's nice for me to be asking the questions instead of you this morning.
I never ask questions.
When you were on the bench, you asked many a question.
No, I just respond to silly questions, but go ahead.
No, this is not a silly question. You say a policeman issues the notice to a man whom he believes to be a dependent on narcotics.
Right.
Will you, perhaps Bert should answer this, I don't know, perhaps you, will you tell the police which addicts you want to get the request notices?
I think I'd rather leave that to Bert.
Bert?
No, we're not doing a street cleaning operation, neither the police. It's up to a policeman, and we are, at the present time, have a team going around briefing the police forces. If a constable or a member of the drug squad or whatever considers that a person in his fair and reasonable judgment is in need of treatment and he considers him to be dependent, he will issue the notice. We will not say go out and get Charlie Brown. We never would and we never will.
So the police may use it from their point of view as a bit of a street cleaning operation, but hopefully you people will brief them to pick the ones who are more likely to respond to treatment?
We've been very careful with the senior levels of the police department and now the beat policemen, which our teams are working with now, to consider that it is not a street cleaning operation. They're not going to do it as a street cleaning operation. They're going to work hand in glove with us in trying to bring a person into treatment who they consider to be in need of treatment.
But are you going to, surely you will set guidelines. If I were you, Bert,
Of course.
I would say, look, I want people who are likely to respond to treatment. I don't want the old 50-year-old junkie on his last mile. You know, no point in taking him in, is there?
Well, yes, there is, because some of those people have reached the point where if we're a compassionate organization, we have to cater to them too. What we don't want is the kind of person that should go down the custodial road. And we have the right to refuse entry.
Oh.
Oh, yes.
You can say, no, let him go through the courts.
That's right.
We don't want him.
That's right.
Will they be able to give them a ticket when they face a charge, Judge Puil? In other words, can a policeman say, hey, I've got you in possession of 5 caps, and this is the 3rd trip you've made to this bundle. Take this notice and I won't charge you. Can they do that?
Yes, legally a peace officer could, if at the time he has reasonable grounds to believe that the person is then dependent on heroin. Yes, he could.
That would raise all kinds of other legal complications though, coming back if the guy wouldn't take it and charging him, would it? Would that be a threat, intimidation, or coercion, or whatnot?
Not necessarily, Jack, no.
In what way, Judge Puil, can the courts themselves, if this is possible, direct a person in front of them into treatment?
Well, as they are presently doing, Jack, any trial judge can, if a person is charged with any offense under the criminal code, for example, or under the Narcotics Act of Canada, if the court decides that that person is really a heroin addict and that's the basis of his criminality, the reason for it, then the judge can make a probation order, and a term of that probation order is that he must report forthwith to the evaluation panel for examination. And then again, as I say, if the panel decides that he truly is a heroin addict and needs treatment, then the process starts to go before the Supreme Court to have him committed.
That's a very simple way. That can be done. Was there an amendment in the federal law to allow this, or is that merely the judge exercising these powers of setting down a specific type of probation?
No, there's enough power in the criminal code at present to allow any judge in BC to do that as of this moment.
So,
as I say, some judges have done it.
So the judge could say, okay, shoplifting. Pardon?
We actually have 7 committals already.
On that?
Do we not, Judge?
Yes.
But the judge can say, okay, Webster, we found you guilty of shoplifting. I'm going to suspend sentence, and you'll be on 3 years probation under the the heroin treatment plan.
More or less, yes.
More or less.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That might be your principal source of entry.
Well, as I was saying, we already have 7 cases that will come into the program on the 1st of January.
And is that a simple, straightforward one whereby there are no further grounds for appeal? Through, you know how these appeals drive everybody crazy on simple things. If a judge does that, is that clear cut into the system if the evaluation panel accepts a man?
Yes. Mind you, any probation order can be appealed. They aren't often, but it could be technically.
Yeah, technically it could be. Okay, more with, we're going to continue with the discussion on drugs. We'll take some phone calls later with Bert Hoskin, chairman of this plan, and Judge Les Buil, the legal consultant to the plan. There's not much point, Mr. Hoskins, is there, in talking about the voluntary approach to this plan? That's one of the big weaknesses in the plan, isn't it?
Well,
I mean, you whip in, an addict gets whipped in, and you bring him in on a notice. I want to ask you about that, Les. Unless he signs in, he can walk away.
No. A person can come in a third way, and that's voluntary entry without going on police orders or through the courts. After all, we have almost 500 people in the province under treatment at the moment. And we have an agreement with all those people who are in before the 1st of June that we will continue their current program. And as long as they don't abuse it, or as long as they don't drop out, they'll continue as voluntary patients. If they drop out or they abuse the program, then they'll probably be picked up in the plan as perhaps compulsory or court entry.
Now, probably every drug addict in the city is watching, and BC is watching this at the moment because of what passes around like mad. Just a chance to deal with a specific detail. The policeman takes a notice, and he says, Mr. Buil, you're a person whom I believe to be such and so-and-so. Report within, what is it,
48 hours.
24 to 48 hours. The policeman doesn't take him.
No, the policeman doesn't take him. He just merely gives him the notice, the way you'd get a traffic ticket.
All right. Now, if a man doesn't appear on that, do you then go looking for him for a bench warrant or something? Or do you just let him vanish into the wilderness?
That's entirely up to the commission. The commission then can apply to a judge for a bench warrant on his failure to appear.
And he'll be brought back to you.
Or, alternatively, the commission could lay a charge, because it is an offense to fail to appear. So 2 things could happen to the addict. He could be charged under the Summary Convictions Act for failing to appear, or he could be arrested as a result of a warrant obtained.
And summary convictions, what's that maximum? $500?
$500 and or 6 months.
6 months. But the object of the exercise wouldn't be to use that, because you don't want to pack the prisons with that kind of thing.
The whole object of the plan, particularly the plan initially, was to do 3 things, and the primary thing was to do something constructive to change the lifestyle of the user. Secondly, to relieve the pressure on the courts and the police.
Next question. That's a deadly serious question about BC Pen. You order your drugs wholesale and you get credit for them, and you score when you get out to pay your bills. How in the name of all that's holy, Bert Hoskins, are you going to make that rather nice water-fronted Brannen Lake drug-free? Are you going to skin frisk everybody who goes in and out?
We have the right of search built into the Act. What people don't appreciate is that we will have daily urinalysis in Brannen Lake, and indeed in the clinics as well. We have a very sophisticated machine. We'll have 14 of them in the program, which within 2 minutes can give you a reading, and an accurate reading as to whether a person contains morphine in the body. That's what we're working with. The fact that a person may get drugs into Brannen Lake, they will not remain undetected. Then we start going at that person who's abusing. Not only that, but we will have a security staff, and we will have a perimeter fence on Brannen Lake which will be patrolled. But it's not patrolled in the sense that a penitentiary is patrolled.
You're
There's
not
no
gonna have-
weapons, there's no uniforms as such.
No weapons, no uniforms, no searchlights.
No.
And your security is going to be built in the fact that every time they take a daily or a urinalysis as required, you can tell at once that they're
Oh, absolutely.
on something.
That's right.
Is that acceptable to court, this kind of urinalysis? Would that be in
It's
possession?
built into the Act.
Would that be in possession of narcotics illegally? Under that testing?
Well, I can't recall at the moment of any particular court case in BC. None have arisen out of the Act because we haven't had any cases out of the Act. And it's not for me to predict what any judge in BC would find acceptable or not.
But you know the point I'm getting at. So, okay,
No.
you know the point I'm getting at.
We're not using the fact that the person is using for a criminal charge.
You're using it to say you will go into isolation?
We're using it, well, he may go down into one of the 2 cottages, for example, that you saw them breaking the walls down, so we could make them into bedrooms instead of cells, and properly furnished bedrooms. We also have the right over a period of time, when we have done everything we can possibly do to help the person, to declare that person unmanageable. Now, if we ever reach the point where he's declared unmanageable, then he will go through the criminal courts, and we will have nothing further to do with him.
You'll wipe them off the list.
We'll
and
wipe them off the
Somebody
list.
can throw them in the bucket and lock them in the bucket and throw away the key under their system.
That's right, because we think that we have done everything that any society can possibly do to help this segment of our society.
Judge, as I said earlier, you've got a lot of experience with addicts. Do you really think that the older addicts, or many of them, are quite beyond redemption? What do you say to that?
I said, yes, many are.
So your selection is going to have to be very careful. But what do you say to these people? I'll be in for criticism now for supporting this act. What do you say to these people who are, especially some of your former colleagues at the bar, who seem to regard the attitude of this act as something approaching Soviet prison camps, gulags? What do you say to them, Les?
Or what would I like to say to them?
Well, feel free to be like to say to them right now. Because I don't believe they represent a majority of lawyers.
Well, this is a public program, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, then I can't really say what I think about them.
Well, I can
Yeah.
always use the kill button.
Well, what I do think is this, Jack, that I find it rather tragic, and if you like, somewhat amusing, because like many judges, I've been sitting in courts for 22 years, one way or another, every day, and almost every day I've heard members of the bar say to the court, don't send this man to prison, he's sick, he's an addict, and that's why he commits crimes. Don't send him to prison. And I've heard this for over 20 years, day in, day out, lawyer in, lawyer out. Now a small section of the bar is very vociferous in saying, don't send him to this hospital plan. He's an addict, but don't send him to the hospital plan. So really, I don't know what that small section of the bar wants.
They don't want to go to jail. They don't want to go to hospital. They don't want treatment. It's an invasion of his so-called civil liberties.
Yes.
They're being hypocrites, some of these people.
Well,
Next, Bert Hoskins, I want to find out specifically where you're shot in your planned facilities and in your, what's the program you call it? Behavioral modification.
Okay,
And I'm
well-
going to take calls now, too.
Sure, all right.
Okay.
Well, right now,
Hold it for a moment. A break. The phone numbers are 299-1371 and long distance collecto 299-1303. But,
yes.
you know, I chatted with the minister. He dodged a little bit, as you will dodge a little bit now.
No,
I'll bet you do.
I don't dodge, Jack, any
Okay.
more than you do.
Brannen Lake will be ready for the 1st of January.
Yes,
No problem on that.
no.
What about your other facilities you used to tell me about? You had a therapeutic kind of communal farm place. Where is that going to be?
That will not be required in the first period. We, in all likelihood, may go to a modular camp in the interior. That will probably come in a little later.
Have you selected a site for the modular camp?
No, the BC Building Corporation has that in hand. We have no control over that.
Will that be a self-help program of some kind for
indeed. Yeah.
What about juveniles? Can they be, I'll ask Les this question, can juveniles be dealt with under this act in the same manner as adults?
The Act places no restriction as to age, and therefore I would think juveniles could be dealt with equally.
What about the area treatment centers of which you talk? How many areas in the province, how many treatment centers, and how many have you not yet located?
Okay, well, we have to approach it in the way that we have 4 existing clinics, although they're too small for the new program in Vancouver. We have 1 in Vancouver, 1 in Nanaimo,
Right.
1 in Campbell River, 1 in Prince George, and 1 in Kelowna.
Right.
And then we have a very small residence we fund in Kamloops called Adonis House. Now, we will be using those temporarily until the others are completed. The 4 in Vancouver, we have 1 already, and the others are being acquired for us by BCBC. Will handle a maximum of 225 patients each.
That's on a daily outpatient basis?
Daily outpatient basis.
You're going to have...
By the way, Jack, we also have a behavior modification unit which is in being, and we have a street unit which is being authorized by the government, is being organized now.
I don't want to get bogged down in this behavior modification, but your critics say, bluntly and perhaps accurately, that in fact you have no new type of treatment at all, other than this new phrase you come up with, physical...
restoration.
Restoration.
No, that's nonsense. We have, for the first time, we have what we call aftercare. Nobody up to now has ever been able to provide the kind of community support we're going to provide.
Well, now, what do you mean, community support?
Well, community support means that when the person comes out of treatment, we will have community care workers on the basis of 1 worker to 25 former users who has a dual role. He both supervises and supports that person in the community. And he'll only have 25 people to 30 people to look after.
And he's got to help find them jobs, housing, get their welfare allowances.
That's right.
Keep them away from their former associates.
That's right. There may be limits on where the person can go without our being involved. For example, if a man is going to get a job somewhere else, a transfer will be arranged to the community care worker in some other part of the province.
25 caseload if you've got 25 devious addicts is pretty tough.
Yeah, but my God, we've got people now on probation and parole who've got caseloads double and treble that.
But what's new about
it's
your
a very
treatment?
good, no, but wait a minute. We also have an agreement with the Department of Vocational Training to give us over 30,000 student days just for our people, and that's never been done before.
Go on.
Brannen Lake will have both, as you've seen from the slides, vocational and educational upgrading. And nobody has ever been able to go into it to this depth ever before. Now, some of these programs have been in being, but certainly not to the extent that we can do it. There's another thing, as you know. We already have a hypnosis program underway.
That's Soviet treatment.
No,
hypnotizing
it's not
people.
Nonsense.
That's what some of the lawyers will say, won't they, Les?
Well, maybe
to
you could
hypnotize somebody, eh?
Well,
Maybe
they're
you
capable
could-
of saying anything.
Maybe you could take the treatment for tobacco use, Jack. I don't know.
Do you see me smoke this morning, Bert Hoskin?
No. No, but let's be serious.
But your pocket is burning.
We have we
thought
have
maybe it was.
we have 2 acupuncturists coming into the scheme. And as you know, that for some reason, which I'm not familiar, I'm not a medical man, it's been very successful used successfully in England and Hong Kong, in
Okay.
withdrawal particularly.
You and I both agree, do we not, Bert, that the important thing is to remove the bad actor from his environment, to clean him up, and give him some motivation.
But everybody isn't a bad actor. Basically, an awful lot of users really are seeking help. What they're incapable of doing is staying long enough under current voluntary treatment to make it effective.
Let's take some phone calls. We'll let the critics at you.
Certainly.
Both of you. I have no critics. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I'd like to know, first of all, is this Brannen Lake thing, is that entirely for just heroin addicts only?
No, I don't know if you've noticed from any releases we've made before, but we offer anybody who has a problem with any illicit drug or any drug to come in on a voluntary basis. Those people would have to come in voluntarily. But we offer this service to them as well.
Yeah, but Brannen Lake's for heroin only, surely, or heroin and
Not
mixture.
necessarily. They may be withdrawn there.
Why do you ask, caller? Why do you ask?
What I'd like to know is, like, I've got a problem myself. I drink too much all the time.
You mean alcohol?
Right.
Well, now, we're not
No,
going to
no.
touch alcoholism this morning.
No, when I talk about other drugs, I'm talking about, we call it alcohol and other drugs.
But phone the Alcohol and Drug Commission, and I'm sure maybe, can you help in that?
Well, we have 47 agencies throughout the province, some of which are intensive residential.
Let's leave alcohol alone. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Webster.
Morning.
Yeah, there's something I'd like to find out. I think it's kind of crazy that they're treating heroin addicts when it's actually their fault that,
What would you do with them?
well, let them do what they want. I figure all the money they're spending here, you're saying $3 million a year.
15 million in the first year, isn't it that?
No, 15 in a full year.
In a full year, yeah.
It's $4,800,000 the startup cost.
Right.
To the balance of this year. No, you see, the trouble is with people who make a statement like that, they're not being logical, because what they're saying is let the man do his own thing. I would agree to the man doing his own thing if society didn't have to pick him up and look after him for the rest of his life, if he found by doing his own thing he couldn't cope with life as the rest of us can.
That's a good answer. Go ahead, please.
Is it me?
That's you, ma'am.
I think it's marvelous that we have this treatment center, and it really deserves the help of every well-thinking citizen. A drug addict and a pusher is an anti-social person. I think he deserves the death penalty, and since he doesn't get that, he must be very happy that there are other people who try to help him and cure him.
Thank you, ma'am, but we're trying to talk about the particular operation of the plan. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to ask the gentleman what type of influx they're prepared to accept of users in this program as of now.
Well, our program is gained at a peak treatment intake of 2,500 and a peak intake and aftercare of 4,000 to 5,000.
Right, and what is the estimated number of users in BC?
The estimated number of users varies from 6,000 to 10,000, but we use a figure of an addict population of 6,000 to 7,000 as being a realistic estimate.
Heroin addict population.
Yeah.
I see.
Are you a user by chance?
Pardon?
You're not involved in it?
No, not at all.
What do you think of the compulsory aspects of this plan?
I think it should be enforced to the fullest.
So do I. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm with the judge. I think that this sort of thing is an invasion of human rights. And although it has its good points, I feel that the other gentleman is just a pattern of government red tape.
Just let's get to Judge Bewley first. Did you say that this bill was, she must have misheard you, Judge, an invasion of human rights? Did you say that?
No, sir, I didn't.
And your views are that it is not, in fact, that was my fault, an invasion of human rights.
Not an illegal one, no.
Not an illegal one. I mean, it's a proper restriction of liberty.
Yes.
In certain cases.
Well, you know, if you get a traffic ticket, your rights are invaded to some extent for making an illegal left turn, but...
Impaired driving.
Oh, or impaired driving, yes.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Hello, Mr. Webster.
Yes.
I tuned in a little late, but I'm very curious. If a person from, say, a middle-aged family has to go to this place for a withdrawal for 3 months, I'm kind of curious. I might have missed it, or you might have mentioned it, but if this is a situation, what happens to his family? Who supports his family while he's in this place of Brannen for a withdrawal?
That's the old story, isn't it, Bert?
Yes.
Well,
is there any answer?
If the person is unable to support his family and it's decreed that he requires this kind of inpatient treatment, obviously arrangements will be made with the Human Resources Department to look after his family through human resource support.
Don't hesitate to call them. Go ahead, please.
I'd like to talk to Mr. Hoskin, please.
Right. Go ahead.
I've been on the methadone program for 13 months, and last month I tried to withdraw, and I had a heck of a time because of the withdrawal symptoms. Can I come in voluntarily to Brannen Lake for 2 to 3 months?
No, if you come in under the program, you'll be in the program for 3 years.
Could I come in to Brannen Lake to dry out, I mean?
Just a minute. You're officially on the methadone program now?
Yes.
And then you broke away from it and tried to withdraw on your own?
Yeah, last March, and I couldn't do it. The symptoms were long lasting.
Well, can he not come in under your period of grace?
Yes, he can, but if he comes in under the period of grace, he's obliged to go through a withdrawal.
Well, is that not what he wants to do?
Well, I'm not quite sure, Jack.
Why don't you go in under the period of grace where you can get the treatment that's available, although Brannen Lake isn't yet open?
No, but one of the first things that'll be open is our detoxification wing and our physical restoration wing.
Well, he should...
And people can go into Brannen Lake just for withdrawal and then back to either outpatient treatment or community support.
But you're clean at the moment in terms of your...
No, I don't think he's clean.
Are you clean?
I'm on methadone right now. I'm not doing any other drugs, but the withdrawal symptoms from methadone are pretty serious, too. Can I voluntarily come into Brannen Lake for 3 months to dry out from methadone?
Well, do you mean then that then you would leave the program after withdrawal?
I would leave the program just before I entered Brannen Lake. Is that possible?
No.
No, I'm not quite sure what he's getting
Wait,
at.
and I'll talk to you off the air. Okay. I'm going to continue with your phone calls after this message. Judge Puil, at the beginning of the program, I made my usual kind of emotional pitch about what a horrible, sobbed, nasty foul with, you know, cages full of dead bodies that have arisen in Vancouver from this. Do you feel as strongly as I do about the misery of this business?
Yes, I do, Jack. And I've been too many years seeing it, and...
For instance?
3 things come to mind. I remember listening to a tape recording of a pimp in a downtown Vancouver hotel telling a 17-year-old prostitute who he had hooked on heroin that she had to go out and turn 2 more tricks before she could come in. And this was at 12 o'clock midnight. And the girl had been out on the streets all day and all evening. She was pleading for arrest. And it was just completely merciless. And I remember, you know, I think of these things in human terms. We get caught up in abstractions about the plan and treatment centers, but the need is so desperate. And I think of a mother that I knew who sat all night for weeks outside of her son's bedroom. She had a fine, strapping 17-year-old boy, and he was howling like an animal all night long trying to get out to get more drugs. He'd taken all the family's savings, passed bad checks, impoverished his family. And all she could do was turn him into the police. There was nothing else, and send him to jail. And it broke her heart to do it. And another thing I think of is a little old guy, about 82, and all he had in the whole world was a TV set. He lived in a Skid Row room. It was his only communication with the whole world. It's all he had. And some addict stole this set and peddled it in the next half an hour for $35 for a cap. So it's, you know, it's these human anguishes that concern me, and that's why I'm hopeful this plan will succeed.
I'm glad you told these stories. Bert, the question I must ask you. In the original plan, there was a provision whereby a father or a mother could turn in their juvenile son or daughter and force them to take treatment. And I thought that was a very good provision.
No, what we did is we gave the family...
I'm thinking about the 17-year-old hooker,
an opportunity
the
to come in and talk with us about entry, and then, if necessary, we could have the person picked up on police notice. But only after the family or the guardian came to us and discussed it with our staff at the Area Coordinating Center.
I want you to be quite frank with me. Do you think you're going to get the patient flow, or do you think that I insist, the watered-down act, and you know what the legal profession will do, you know it might be 3 months before you can get a case up in front of a Court of Appeal judge, a Supreme Court judge, to verify whether or not the man should be ordered into treatment. Do you think you're going to get the patient flow?
Ultimately, yes. No question.
How about you?
Well, it has created problems for us. It's going to mean that it's going to be very difficult to anticipate patient flow. I think the first cases tested in the court will give us the answer.
You're not anticipating massive legal tests of the plan the moment it's used, are you?
I hear some rumors that there may be.
There's a rumor that there is a fund actually being raised to fight this.
Oh, I can well understand that. Well, gentlemen, I suppose that the proof of your pudding and my enthusiasm for the plan will be in the eating, won't it?
Yeah, I just want to say one thing that everybody forgets.
What's that?
We have, and I make no apologies for this, whatever, as much responsibility to our society as we have to any individual within the society, and by God, we're going to live up to that dual responsibility.
Best of luck, Bert. Best of luck, Judge Bewley. And let me tell you that we've had around 5 minutes of pretty heavy stuff. From now till the end of the program, we're going to have a laugh. And we're going to laugh at some politicians in that great, wonderful city of Vancouver. Count to 30 seconds. After having Bill Rathie on the air the other morning, and he'd gone for the mayor of Vancouver, couldn't resist but go to the N.P.A. convention in the Hyatt Regency last night. A little bit of a bomb scare, no great panic. The panic was behind the scenes, where Rathie was outfoxed and outflanked, and where they came up with Volrich, who wasn't even there, as the, official nominee for the mayor of Vancouver. That was a surprise to Rathie, and a pleasant surprise, I suppose, for Volrich, but it's not over yet. I talked to Rathie last night. Did I? Oh, yes, this is just at the meeting place if my microphone is still on. What went wrong with the strategy tonight, Bill?
Well, really, I have no idea. I'll admit it was rather a surprise to me because I had a lot of very strong supporters at the meeting tonight.
It looked to me like your friends were really strong on the nominating committee because there's nothing in the bylaws about a certificate of eligibility, and suddenly Volrich's people were embarrassed by the lack of a certificate of eligibility. Just what was that particular ploy?
I don't really know. It struck me as very peculiar because I do understand that Jack Volrich is still a member of TEAM.
Yeah, you mean, therefore, as a member of TEAM, if you could prove that, he would not be eligible for the N.P.A. nomination.
Well, it's of my knowledge, and I was so informed on good authority that his family were at the nominating meeting of TEAM. He was their candidate until either they chucked him or he chucked them. I don't know which it was, but it's a most peculiar mix-up, to say the least.
Mind you, you came out from, if you'll forgive the expression, left field for this. You didn't actually prepare your groundwork that solidly this time. You didn't bring a whole swatch of Rathie supporters tonight, did you?
No, that's true, but bear in mind this is rather a small group, and it's not really a representative group of the city of Vancouver as a whole. We know that.
The smart boys next door are saying, oh, now that Rathie's been rejected by the N.P.A., he'll drop out. You watch him. He won't go without the N.P.A. nomination. Now, I want you to commit yourself one way or another, if you wouldn't mind, right now.
Oh, I think I did that the other day, Jack, in your program. I'm in this right to the end, and I'm going to be the next mayor.
No nonsense.
No nonsense.
Whether or not you're the next mayor, you're going to campaign from here to the end.
Sure, heck. I believe in what I'm stating with regard to this, and I think it's a real necessity for Vancouver to get better leadership than we've been having in the past. I'm quite convinced, and I didn't come out and say so with regard to the aldermen here tonight, but they're a pretty weak, sickly bunch, aren't they?
Now, how can you be elected mayor and work with some of that weak, sickly bunch?
Well, I found this, that a strong leader can lead a council, and a weak leader gets absolutely nowhere with a strong council or a weak council.
In other words, as a strong mayor, you could lead that weak, sickly bunch run by the nose.
No, I wouldn't like to put it by the nose, but what you really do is you give leadership, you put proposition together that, in fact, they just can't turn down.
Bill, who are your, not that you need financial backers, you're independent, shall I say, without pushing the money thing too far, but who are your principal backers? Name a couple for me.
No, I'm not going to get into that.
How about Duncan Kendrick of the N.P.A.?
Oh, he's a good friend of mine.
Jimmy Teaporton?
Well, Jimmy, I've known Jimmy for many, many years. We were associated in business one
Warren
time.
Kennedy?
You got to be kidding.
George Puil?
Who's he?
So you're in till the end?
You're darn right, sure.
Spending your own money?
That's right. Why not?
As much as is necessary?
Well, you know, Jack, I'm like you. I'm a second-generation Glaswegian. And,
nasty people.
I've got deep pockets and short arms, but I'm quite prepared to get into this thing, and I'm going to guarantee this. We're going to have the best damn election we've had in the city of Vancouver.
You mean the best damn campaign?
It's election campaign, put the whole thing together. We're going to have more excitement. We're going to be doing more things. This is going to be great for everybody.
One little topical question, and I want to re-ask you from earlier on. What would you do with that Jericho mess? Bulldoze a lot away?
Sure would. We got that from Paul Hellyer, Earl Adams and I, in 1964, and they're still sitting around picking their nose looking at it.
Get rid of it.
Darn right, clean it up.
Fair enough. Now, that was the N.P.A. meeting, and the N.P.A. it was dead. Rathie revitalized it. And then the weak, sickly bunch whom Rathie describes, including George Puil, outfoxed them last night. Let's talk to George Puil. Mr. Puil, what's this funny business that happened tonight about the certificate of eligibility? I've been coming to N.P.A. meetings for nigh on 20 years, and I never ever had that before.
Well, it's happened before, evidently. I wasn't aware of it at the time, and it should have been brought to my attention,
Just
but
a
I
minute.
do recall...
Did Rathie's friends bring this in tonight to try and foul up Volrich?
I don't know. I'm not going to accuse anybody, but it did come up, but it seemed a bit odd to me that we should ask somebody to sign an eligibility paper when, in fact, he's already the mayor of the city. And the paper reads, are you eligible to become mayor of the city?
It's not in the bylaws, you know.
No, I understand it isn't in the bylaws. I feel it's a fruitless exercise. I admire Jack for signing it. My wife went to his home and asked him to sign it. It said that he was eligible to be a mayor, and in fact he wasn't a member of any other organization.
You mean when the whole thing cropped up at the meeting, you sent your wife scurrying out to Jack's house to get the paper signed?
That's right, and I've got to admire her speed. I'm sorry, I'm kind of wondering why she wasn't arrested, because she was back in a few seconds.
But it's a strange situation.
It is.
Rathie has told me that to his knowledge, Jack Volrich is still a member of TEAM. Did your wife ask him that one?
Well, on the paper it says that he has to sign that he's not a member of any organization, that he is an independent.
So you accept
that? And he has signed that paper, and as his signature, it is his signature, unless my wife has forged it, and I don't think she would resort to that.
No,
sort
your
of
wife
thing.
wouldn't do that
No,
kind of thing.
No.
Aren't you vaguely embarrassed by the whole business?
I am embarrassed by it because I think Bill Rathie is a fine man, and he's done good service to the city, but I honestly felt that if we endorsed Bill Rathie, that he would not win, but he would take enough votes away from Jack Volrich to make the TEAM mayoralty candidate the next mayor of the city of Vancouver.
But you'd have been happy if Volrich hadn't come forward at all, or if you hadn't pushed him to have Rathie as your candidate for mayor, wouldn't you?
Well, I didn't say that. No, I don't think I would have been happy.
You did.
No, I said I would accept him as the mayoralty candidate for the N.P.A. because that's what nonpartisanship is about. They endorse the membership, endorse the candidate. I've lived with candidates in the past that I didn't agree with. And it's not up to me to say, look, I think they made a mistake. I would have accepted it, and so would have the other incumbents.
What you've probably done tonight with all this fussing about is split N.P.A. in pieces, probably, eh?
I don't think so. I think you saw what happened out there. You saw the hand clapping that went on.
Well, Mike Francis, the fine hand of Mike Francis was behind this tonight,
I don't think I could say that. I talked to Mike Francis this afternoon. I talked to him about 2 days ago, and I don't think Mike has been in the picture at all. I think the incumbents, in looking at the situation, assessed it, and we felt that we didn't want a left-wing socialist control of council.
Now, who are the left-wing socialists who could control council?
One of your best friends, Harry Rankin.
One of my best friends?
One of your best friends. You used to have breakfast with
What do you mean one of my
them.
best friends?
Well, you know, as a matter of fact,
I've
in an
had
article...
breakfast with you, and you're not one of my best friends.
I can't recall having breakfast with you, and I'm sure I probably
yes,
picked
we
up
have,
the
in
tab.
the old Georgia Hotel.
Listen now, Jack. Now, you recall, as a matter of fact, a newspaper article of a couple of weeks ago where you said the most influential man in the city of Vancouver was Harry Rankin.
I said the most influential alderman with the best propaganda machine was Harry Rankin.
It reads a little differently. All right, who are the other socialists? Let's look at Mike Harcourt.
Okay,
Let's look at Darlene
N.P.A.
Missouri. Of course. Well, aren't they socialists? Let's look at the voting patterns of some of the TEAM individuals. I think that they've been infiltrated with the left wing, and certainly down through the last 6 years.
Describe May Brown for me. Is she a socialist?
I think May Brown leans towards the left, and I think she's more prone to back Missouri and Harcourt than she is to back the N.P.A. As a matter of fact...
What she really is Art Phillips' nominee, right?
Possibly so, but let me ask you a question. Why is it that Harcourt, Missouri have endorsed Brown, and Rankin, as a matter of fact, has stepped out of the picture, indicating his quiet endorsement of Brown?
Matter of fact, if Harry had run this time, he might well have made it, mightn't he?
That's right. It's a pity that he didn't take the bull by the horns. I'm glad he didn't, because I think he'd be the worst mayor this city ever had.
Rathie is going to run. Rathie was one of the better mayors the city ever had, wasn't he?
In a different era.
And Volrich. Do you think Volrich has been a good mayor?
I think that Volrich will become one of the better mayors we've had. I think that you go through a learning process.
Up to now, how would you describe him?
Let me finish. I think that we go through a learning process on council. I was so naive 4 years ago to think that I could step into the mayoralty position without running the gamut of being on council, without the experience of council. You have to have that. And I admit freely right now that I would not have made a good mayor without that experience.
You're never going to run again?
I don't know. Things may happen, but I certainly have no inclination
at
at this
least
stage.
you say, is backing Volrich, that Volrich is beginning to learn a little bit. Is that right?
He's learned a lot. He's learned to communicate. Now, granted, he may not be able to communicate with people like Harcourt, who never attempt to communicate with him, who are so vindictive in their criticism of him. I think you have to talk to the man.
Tell me, were you asked to bring out extra bodies tonight because of the threat of Rathie?
Did I? Well, I'll tell you something. I went over old friends and asked them to become members, and most of them were renewals, because after all, I've had 16 years with the N.P.A., and I've got a lot of old members that are still good friends that would turn out if I got on a phone and asked them
Rathie's going to run. Rathie's going to spend his own money.
Just a minute, Jack.
So that means that what's her name, Brown, is going to be the next mayor of Vancouver.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think that would do Vancouver any good. I think that Jack Volrich is going to be the re-elected as the next mayor of Vancouver.
Best of luck. What's your name again?
It's Puil.
How'd you
spelled
spell
with
it?
a P. P-U-I-L.
Thanks, George.
Thanks for the interview.
Good old George. The exact count last night was really quite strong for Rathie. There were 95 votes for Rathie and 145 votes for Volrich, who wasn't there, but the sense was difficult. Now for one of the backroom boys, Mike Francis, former president of the Non-Partisan Association. Little chat with him. I'm told the fine hand of that political past master, Mike Francis, former president of the N.P.A, was partly, if not totally, responsible for the demolition of Rathie tonight. Do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty. Not guilty at all.
Well, I want to ask you about this funny certificate of eligibility. Now, obviously, you didn't have a part in that. Why is it in all these 20 years I've been coming to N.P.A conventions to pick mayors, this is the first time I've heard that thing?
Well, there's always been a certificate of eligibility, but the importance of it has never been at the nominating convention. One of the undertakings that the candidates give us is that prior to filing their official nominating forms at City Hall, which is done some 2 weeks prior to the election, then they have to file a certificate of eligibility.
Did Volrich forget to do that this time?
I gather he did. It's of no consequence. He doesn't have to file it with us under our normal rule for another 2 weeks.
So George sent his wife up quickly to get the proper document?
Apparently.
That's George Puil?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
You can't be happy, though. Surely you, of all people, would rather see a good establishment figure like Rathie, the bean counter, the accountant, the efficiency man, the man who's going to keep a tight rein on the budget, than the kind of lackluster Volrich.
I'm delighted. I think it's a wonderful result.
Do you agree with Puil that Volrich will keep out the left-leaning people on council, and you'd rather have the Kennedys and the Puils and the Gerards and the team people, of course?
Our slate will keep out the left-leaning and the team people.
How are you doing for money this time? Because this organization was dead a year ago.
No, it wasn't. No, it hasn't been dead for years.
How much money you got in the kitty?
Oh, I wouldn't think very much, but I have no knowledge of that.
Oh, not
None.
now?
No, none.
But you'd give them what you could afford to help run the campaign.
Indeed, I wouldn't.
Thank you, Mike.
Right.
Much obliged. He's the guy who's always mentioned in Fotheringham's columns, you know, when Fotheringham's in town at any time. Now we come to an interesting little interview with George Kendrick, who's the president of the N.P.A. and who is highly unenthusiastic about the chosen candidate, Volrich. Just you listen to what George tells me. Duncan Kendrick, president of the Non-Partisan Association?
Correct.
Do you want to give thanks to Rathie for bringing your meeting back to life tonight, because otherwise it would have been stone cold dead?
It was an excellent meeting, and I was very happy with the turnout.
That's not what I asked you. Did you not thank Rathie for bringing it back to life tonight?
It didn't need bringing back to life. It's never been dead. It's been alive all the time.
Oh, come on now. You were bankrupt a couple of years ago. You didn't have a nickel in the kitty, and you'd lost all your power at City Hall.
That's not correct. We've never been bankrupt.
You've been close to it.
All political associations are close to it after an election's over with.
Now, the nominating committee tonight came up with a strange certificate of eligibility. Where did that come from?
It is not a strange certificate of eligibility, Jack. That eligibility certificate has been involved in N.P.A. conventions ever since I've been involved, and it's been on the agenda. The agenda we followed tonight was basically the same agenda as 2 years ago and 4 years ago, with a few names changed.
I hear rumors already that a number of your important members are going to quit because you backed Volrich instead of a good, solid N.P.A. man like Rathie.
I've been hearing rumors about people quitting no matter what happened tonight, so you don't believe rumors, Jack. We'll see what happens. We're stronger now than we ever were.
Yeah, but is it not a little bit worrying to you, in fact, that Rathie, I'm told that Volrich, in fact, until very recently at least, was a member of team.
Mr. Vollrich was, yes. He was
You know
elected
that?
mayor under team.
Do you think he's changed his stripes now?
Well, he must have, because this is why we asked the certificate of eligibility to be signed. It states that you are not a member of another organization, a civic organization.
When were these certificates actually prepared?
Oh, they were prepared. They've been in my file for 4 years now.
Will you, Duncan Kendrick, give your full support to Vollrich as your mayoral candidate?
I'm going to support the free enterprise system. And
that's not what I asked you. Are you going to give Vollrich your full support?
Any issues that are brought out during this election, I'll be supporting the people who are following the ways I feel about it.
Oh, it might be Rathie and not Vollrich.
I'm not going to answer that question
I'm
at this
asking
time.
you quite simply, are you going to support Vollrich all the way regardless?
I'm going to support the people who are following my philosophy.
Is that not a kind of evasive answer to a simple question?
It's a very evasive answer, because I am the first one to admit that I was a Bill Rathie supporter this evening. And I've got to think about it for a while.
You're very disappointed.
I'm disappointed, but I think N.P.A. is the important thing right now, and the city of Vancouver is the important thing, and how the city is run.
And you don't plan tonight, or at this moment, to quit the N.P.A. and back Rathie?
Not at all. Not at all.
You might, though, if Vollrich doesn't measure up.
No, I won't quit the N.P.A.
You might quit Vollrich, though, if he doesn't measure up.
No, not necessarily, Jack.
Not necessarily?
No.
Duncan, thank you for an honestly evasive answer to my questions.
You're welcome, Jack.
Thank you. My apologies to Duncan Kendrick for calling him George. I'll say Duncan 100 times in the car on the way home tonight. Now look at that situation. That man, Kendrick, is the president of the N.P.A., and he obviously wants no part of Vollrich, because he was part of the group that wanted Rathie as an official nominee. I predict, should I predict? Yes, I'll predict. I predict that you'll have a number of serious defections from the Non-Partisan Association. And if I were Harry Rankin this morning, I'd be thinking, Brown's going, Rathie's going, Vollrich is going, the VIA, whatever it is, have got somebody coming up, some other party's got something coming up. If I were Bruce York, I might say, hey, maybe I should drop out. Maybe this is the year Harry might run and slip in. Anyway, it just gave you a little ad-lib insight to the N.P.A. meeting in the Hyatt Regency last night. Don't need it. Well, he kind of relax.
Brian, say a few words. Brian.
I'm going to do a... 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, what time had to be off? What time have I got?
How much time have we got till the end of the show now?
Can I see Linda?
How much time do we have to end the show, dear?
Test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
2 minutes exactly to fill, right?
2 minutes exactly to fill. 2 minutes to fill. Okay, I'll do...
Linda, say a couple of words.
Hello, hello, hello.
Do a minute. Brian, you had Bert Hoskin this morning, just a quick switch at the end here, making it quite clear that for security, they're going to rely on their daily urinalysis and chemical tests. Having been over there and having a good idea what it looks like and knowing a bit about drug addicts, do you think that'll work?
No, I can't see it working. For one thing, what's to stop them from climbing the fence and disappearing? It's a heavily wooded area. A lot of them are going to be there because they don't want to be there. And boom.
That's what worries me about the whole thing, because unless they make that drug-free, how can you carry on with proper treatment if any drugs are going to get in, if it's going to be like the BC Pen or Ocala?
Oh, it's dead.
Well, you're going to have to go back once they get an operation in the spring and do a spy job on the place to see what's happening over there.
Not only that, we hear that there's a lot of addicts that have just flown the coop already.
Well, you know, as long as we don't have a lot of unpaid civil servants because the addicts are in Alberta, it's good to see them go. I'm quite blunt about that. Aren't you?
Oh, yeah. It's Alberta's problem.
Anyway, we started the ball rolling on that one again. And the one thing we learned this morning very good is that we can tell addicts, unfortunately, that the police will not be issuing the report notices to them until the 1st of March or the 1st of April at the earliest. Thanks very much, Brian. Linda, what is for tomorrow?
You've got your old friend, J.V. Klein, speaking on the Constitution.
Oh, yeah, we're going to do that on what? Oh, yeah, the Constitution, the monarchy. We'll throw Trudeau at him, and he's very good indeed at it. There he is there. He won't be in full uniform tomorrow morning, though. It'll just be J.V. Klein, who's really one of the experts in the Constitution from a Western viewpoint. My thanks to Bert Hoskin, Bob McClelland, Les Bewley, Brian Coxford, Linda Dutka, Fred Hatt, Uncle Tom Cobley, and all. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. precisely.